Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. This is a meeting that we scheduled today with our WASAC partners. So we have our interim director, Derek Young, here with us today to kind of give us what we call a courthouse briefing and an update is what is happening with WASAC and within the counties across the states. So thank you for joining us today. We're happy we could do this. We do have kind of a time crunch because I know Commissioner French and I have to be South County by 10 o'clock, ready to go. So we're hoping to kind of wrap up about 9:45, sorry. And then, but I would encourage anyone that has any further questions that don't get answered today to please reach out to Derek. Because we do want to make sure that everybody's aware and up to date as to what's going on with WASAC. So with that, I will turn it, and let the record reflect that we have all 5 commissioners present. Commissioner Waldorf and CUNY are in the conference room. On Zoom is Commissioner Kearns, Commissioner Jordan, and Commissioner French. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it because it's important information to get out to everybody.
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me, especially on short notice. When we decided for me to come over for the WASALFO conference and have a chat with them, thought, if we can make this work with Spokane and maybe a couple other counties, that would be great. So I really appreciate the short notice visit. So for those that don't know me, I know Commissioner CUNY and French, but my name is Derek Young. I am the new interim executive director for the Washington State Association of Counties. And prior to that time, I was a county council member myself in Pierce County, spent 2 terms there. And then prior to that, I was a city council member in Gig Harbor for 16 years. So I'm not new to local government and certainly was active in WASAC's legislative steering committee for a number of years. I served as one of the co-chairs for 5 of those years. And so when I had heard that Eric Johnson, the previous executive director, was retiring, a couple of folks had reached out to ask if I would be interested in applying for the interim position. And of course, because county family matters a lot to me, and I was glad to work with it for a long time, I said yes. And so Eric Johnson retired on May 31st, so it's just me now. We did have a great transition period, which was very helpful so that I could get out on the road and talk to a lot of counties. So the board was, appreciate the board giving me that extra time. So over about a month and a half, I tried to absorb Eric's 17 years of history with the organization and also get out to meet as many commissioners as possible. So I'm going to really touch on, I think, the most critical issues, but I'm happy to share any other updates with you one-on-one, either by phone or Zoom at your pleasure. The courthouse briefing document you see has a lot of the information that we usually go over. I think the important highlights that I won't cover are like into the budget issues, but I do want to touch on some of the things that have changed. As we were referencing before the meeting started, obviously the county families had a little bit of turmoil over the last year or so, that ultimately resulted in one of our counties, King, no longer being a dues paying member. That's significant for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we want all 39 counties to be active members of the association, but also because King is so large and accounted for about 25% of our general dues, it created a significant budget problem. And so we had to respond to both of those. Further, Snohomish and Pierce started raising concerns after that, if they didn't see some changes in the way things were going, that they might also depart, which would obviously be an existential threat to the organization. So even prior to my arrival, a bylaws committee was convened, and that bylaws committee has been working on some potential changes that will be presented to the full body at the end of June, which we at a meeting we hope you'll be able to join us at either in person or by Zoom. That's being held in Yakima on the 26th.
What time?
It's in the afternoon. I'm blanking on the time exactly. I think it's at 1. I really should.
Yeah, I think it's 1 o'clock as well. But just note that June 26th will be another general membership meeting for the full membership, which is, in person or on Zoom. So it'll be important, I would say, to all commissioners to be in attendance if you can.
And particularly because under the current bylaws, which we're looking at a change, the vote total for a county depends on how many members are there. So that is important. So
Maybe I stated it is kind of quasi weighted voting because we do have 5 commissioners now, and so all 5 are valid commissioners to vote. It's unlike the LSC where it's 1 commissioner that's there. So the general membership meeting is important to have our voices heard and have the county represented.
Commissioner CUNY, can you make sure we all get the Zoom link to that?
Yes, I will make sure.
Thank you.
In addition to the bylaws, I first want to get to the changes in the legislative steering committee process, because that was sort of, I think, our first real showing of how things can work if we change things a little bit, but also change the way we approach issues. So the legislative steering committee adopted some of its own new rules. They had previously always met as 39 members, each county getting 1 vote, or the counties that had an elected executive, if they chose to be there, or their representative, they got an extra vote. So it was essentially 39 votes for the most part. The decision was that there was a feeling amongst some of the larger counties that they weren't getting issues that they wanted onto the legislative agenda. And so there was a particular carve out for quote unquote urban issues. Then make sure that more rural counties, smaller counties also got a chance to have their say. There was carve out for rural issues. The all county process was really for any county that or any issue that covered all 39 counties. What we actually found in the process is quite a few of the issues that were identified either as urban or rural in reality were affected all counties. And I think that's part because we tend to think of like Pierce County or King County as urban or rural or urban, but in fact have large rural areas that they also serve. And so a lot of the issues that affect those of us that live in those areas very much face some of the issues that face some of the smallest rural counties. We were just talking about rural broadband a little bit ago and the struggles that we've had in Pierce County, and you've got a solution that you're coming up with to provide some broadband. So broadband is a great example of those kinds of issues. So the process was effectively to have a weighted vote so that each county was based on population, and actually it was their dues. So technically the dues could change things if we make some changes there. But based on the dues you pay, you got a percentage of the vote. And in order to get one of those issues onto the urban issues section, you had to get 75%. And so that 75% meant just a couple counties can't dominate the discussion. It really needed buy-in from much more than just the largest urban counties. And so we went through and adopted 2 issues for that. The rural issues section was next. And the reason that we put them second, it was that they would go then by each county, the old method where everyone got a single vote, meaning that the largest number but lowest populations would be able to adopt essentially what they needed for those rural issues. And then finally, we moved to the all county section, and that required an 85% buy-in. That's the standard we're going to use as a consensus for issues kind of throughout the session. So we won't adopt a position on an issue unless it's got broad buy-in. So we start at neutral, and if we want to support or oppose something, we need 85% of the members by county, not by population, to buy into that. And I will just say that I think the process went exceedingly well. Everyone seemed to agree that come away from the process feeling like their voice was heard. And one of the best parts of it was we wanted to make sure that everyone felt like they were connecting on issues that were important to them. And so we mixed up the tables so that every table that was having their breakout had folks from the largest counties, the smallest counties, east and west side of the mountains, even political mixes, to try to get as much conversation out of that, with staff also helping with support. And I think what came out of that as a result, so for example, FSEC is the siting for new clean energy projects. That's an issue that has frustrated a lot of east of the mountain counties, because those projects are mostly being cited over here and not getting and not on the west side of the mountains, which are primarily benefiting from it. So we want to be able to talk to the state about either requiring them to meet growth management and siting standards that the county set, or at least to provide some sort of hold harmless, so that there's no question about litigation that the county's not responsible. And basically you can say, this is a decision of the state. That probably would not have gotten onto the radar of a lot of our larger west side counties had it not been for that conversation. But as a result, it made it onto our agenda. Interestingly, the urban counties really didn't have much that they were asking for that was really urban in nature. In fact, the top priority was indigent defense. And then the second was revenue. And revenue we're describing both as potentially new options, but also shared revenue with existing resources that the state has. Those two issues really touch on every county. And so we quickly adopted those. And so there wasn't a lot of debate over the ones that the counties that felt like they weren't getting their voice heard. On the rural side, we also had issues related to corners. So again, for those of us in the urban counties, that's simply not something that's on our radar. But for the very smallest counties, that's a real critical issue. And then we also have two additional issues related to housing affordability. And we're working both from a land use perspective and potential resources. And then finally, we think there's going to be a transportation package focused on maintenance and operations. We all know that that's been a real problem for us in counties for a long time. Previous packages that the state has passed, unlike in now ancient history, for the last 20 years or so, they really haven't included local governments. And so both cities and counties have been left out. And that's starting to show on our roads. So we're going to make a push that if you would like our help with this, you need to include counties in your package. Sorry.
Oh,
sure.
yeah, no, I think that's all very true. And so all of this came out of just the most recent retreat that we had over in Alderbrook. Commissioner French was on Zoom, was able to attend some of it. I was in person for some of it. I missed the last day on the voting, but Commissioner French and I kind of played tag team on it. So this is all so it's not in your brochures or any of that, because it's all new information that's just
news,
kind of breaking news that's just coming out. And I will say, that those changes we were able to do at LSC were because of the bylaw changes that we did make in November at the general membership meeting. So there was changes. I like to reiterate that there was a lot of work that was done on the bylaws last year that we did make advances on at the general membership meeting. There was just one that wasn't fully accepted at the general membership meeting. And that's what we're still continuing to work on. But I do want to give credit to the people last year on the committee that there was a lot of work that was done to make possible us moving forward with LSC in the way that we're doing it this year. And it also allowed for the executives from the largest counties to then be, I think at this point, it's just King County could have had a voting member on LSC, but we're looking at future bylaw changes that will continue to add to that Derek will talk about. But I just want to say that it was a lot of work from the people that were last year and your votes last year at the general membership meeting to approve a lot of the items that allowed us to get to where we're at today on LSC. And I think gives us that opportunity where we were seeing the progress of what was happening at LSC to then move us into the direction that we can see where the general membership can potentially go. And I see Commissioner French, you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Derek, for being here. I mean, had the opportunity to work with Derek for many, many years, and the one thing that I really appreciated about him was the fact that he was always open to hear the other side and try and work to find a compromise and stuff. So I really appreciated that about you, and I look forward to working with you again. The one thing I wanted to leave with my fellow commissioners is that this was a very challenging time, and finding compromise was really a big lift, and so we in talking to some of the folks on the LSC, you know, it's like we're going to vote in faith and confidence that we can achieve a unified structure for Wasac. But there is, I want to be very transparent. There is still some trepidation and some challenges ahead. And I think Derek touched on one of them, and that's the whole issue around energy. It's interesting, and just and not to campaign here, I'm not doing that, but I just want to point out a real prime example is that the western side of the state supported eliminating natural gas because they don't need it. We do. But yet, to be able to support the replacement for natural gas, you need renewable energy, which is windmill and solar farms, which are on the eastern side of the state. So we're supplementing their elimination of their gas source or their energy source, but we're still going to be really cold during the winter. And so that's just an example of some of the tension that does exist. And, you know, I know that all of us, I mean, on the other side of the state, they think that beef comes out of the grocery store, and we know it actually comes off the ranch. You know, it's, I think this is going to be a real challenge for us as a group to find a solution that works for everybody. So anyway, just wanted to share that with my fellow commissioners. Thanks.
Thank you. And then the last thing I'll just say is that we knew that the weighted voting and dues were, you know, we in the bylaws committee at the end of last year, we came to that just literally right before the meeting. And so there wasn't enough time to socialize it and get it out there. And so that is part of what Derek is doing today too, is to, as we continue to work on the bylaws committee, to look at that, is to then try to get it out here so everybody is aware before we have that June, end of June meeting.
Yeah, and especially, you noted that the work was completed just before that meeting, and so there wasn't much time. So for many people showing up for the first time, they were seeing it, you know, that was the first time they were seeing it. So imagine you're from a very small county, you haven't heard about this, and you look at the sheet and it says you're going to get less than a fraction of a vote. Now, that probably doesn't feel real good. And so going back to revisit that issue, ensure that everyone starts out with at least a single vote. And then we work from there based on the dues you pay. That is being received a lot differently as I've traveled around. So at this point, I've visited most of the counties east of the mountains, and the conversation is much different. So, and the other part I will say is they also have been receptive to the fact that we get that the issues we have are different. So as long as everyone's voice is heard, I think we're going to make some progress here. I do want to talk about, before we run out of time, the potential changes that are coming. So we will have plenty of time to get it out, hopefully, and answer questions and make sure everyone understands what's happening. But really the only additional changes we're looking at this point, because the first, you know, iteration that we heard from Snohomish in particular was a need for changes on the board. In the end, what is being recommended so far is really looking at just adding a seat for the 3 elected executives in counties over 750,000. So that's really just Snohomish, King, and Pierce. So they would have a seat. And the second part of that is to allow someone from staff to be able to vote in their stead. So
Just for executives.
Just for executives, yeah. The idea there is that in the past, like at LSC, the executive has always been able to select like another council member, for example, to go in their place and vote. In fact, that was how I first started on the LSC. But that was only for the Legislative Steering Committee. This would add the possibility on the board. And so a staff member, typically their governmental affairs or a deputy executive would be able to have their voice heard at the meetings. Other than that, it does not look like most of the other things that have come up in the past, adding additional seats beyond the executives is as big of a concern as dues. So this Friday or next Friday, we are going to today, yeah, excuse me. We're going to I know I'm my days are running together. We're going to discuss possibilities around dues, and there's already a cap in existence for King County, and the reason that cap is there is both because it's a recognition that they were paying a significant portion of the membership fees, but second, because the organization was over reliant on that as a source of revenue, and it came up in an audit prior to my time, by a few years. I think it came up 3 or 4 years ago. There is a feeling amongst a couple of the larger counties that they'll be asked to pick up the slack if King County doesn't come back. And so they want to look at other methods of potentially keeping those dues in proportion to what they pay. Snohomish in particular has a concern that by basing it on population alone, it doesn't consider their resources. So Snohomish County, because of some decisions made years ago, their property tax collections are like about 2/3 of what Pierce County is. And they're really the same size and population. So they're hoping for kind of a mix between population and actual revenue raised. We're also looking at a couple other possibilities that Bridget will introduce. But here's the trick. They probably won't include bylaw changes. So we may ask for a rule change that would essentially ask us to put something into policy, which is an easier fix. It can be done with the board's approval. But the reason that we're calling this special meeting is because one of the rules passed last year requires that in order to vote on bylaw changes, you have to, or in order to vote on anything, you need to be a fully paid member. Both Snohomish and Pierce have not paid as of this date by June 30th.
By June 30th. So that's why the date of the meeting is prior to June 30th.
So, so what we will do is call this General Assembly meeting. Typically, we just have it during the annual meeting. That General Assembly meeting will then adjourn after we do conduct our business to the later date, and it will be continued for our budget purposes. The reason that we can't do the budget now is just simply it's not ready. We're not at that point. And if we were to continue having the General Assembly adopt the legislative agenda, which we actually are going to recommend that we not continue doing, that would also be difficult to do at this time because it still needs a lot of work by staff. So we think that the proposals that you see will be fairly straightforward and show that there's been a lot of good faith effort by everyone in order to continue going. And at that point, what we're also going to recommend as a change is that if you are 50% paid on June 30th, that you're still an active member. That seems to be the level that Snohomish and Pierce are willing to do and show good faith again that they think some compromises have been made, progress has been made to their concerns, and so they'll then continue being active members at that time. So I know it's a little bit lots of balls in the air, and this sounds like we're building an airplane as we fly, but really, I think the good news is everyone is working well together, and we're moving towards a place that I think everyone agrees is workable.
So is King County then, so June 30th is the deadline to pay your dues. I'm just trying to,
King County is not paying dues. this year.
okay, so they are, that has been completely decided.
Well.
It felt like it was up in the air.
I'll put it this way,
so-
they were already a year past, and
Right,
so
right.
they are not an active member right now.
Okay,
We are in constant communication with their staff though. And actually I've I've had meetings with their council members and executive. I don't want to get our hopes up that they will be coming back anytime soon, but I will say that they're watching the progress that's been made. They were interested in the LSC agenda that was adopted. And so I think we're getting to a place where when I revisit them after we make some changes with the current members, that we can talk about them rejoining as a full member.
but the plan is to budget and plan for this next year without King County. Okay,
Yes.
and then all these other changes with Pierce and Snohomish are still underway, under discussion.
Right.
And that's why that June 26th date is important for all the members to
Exactly.
discuss. Okay.
Yeah, and if you do look at the budget, you will see in there that we are operating in a loss. It's thanks to the board's, previous good stewardship. We have a healthy end fund balance, but it is time to get right. And so that will mean some, we're already down at one staff position, and we'll need to start looking at other cuts if we don't get back to full strength.
And I was unable to be at the last bylaws committee meeting, so I'll get caught up this afternoon on that. I was with Fairchild up in Alaska, so.
We didn't have anything that was adopted that, but we definitely got some good direction, and you'll see proposals from Bridget on, what we can.
Great.
What we think we heard.
And it's like we've all been, the bylaws committee has been continuing to meet to really talk through all of this, and it's all been good progress, and, we truly all, similar to what Commissioner French said, we want to keep everybody together. It's, everyone wants to be listening, helping, guiding to keep us all together, because if we're stronger as an association together to make change, and the legislature sees us that way. So, they see the power of WASAC. So I think it's all gonna be good.
And one thing I've been talking with those counties about, because they have their own lobbyists, and
And so do we.
yeah,
It's like a lot of counties.
yeah, a lot of them do but they serve a different function. I actually used to be a contract lobbyist, and I worked on behalf of a number of cities, and you're there to advocate for that city, typically on projects and things that are particular to those communities. But that the notion that they can take over the responsibilities of WASAC is just not going to work. One, because you don't have access to everyone else's legislators. So that's a big deal. But the member services is another huge portion. I'm here for the Wasalfo conference. That's possible because WASAC exists. Our affiliates, for engineers, planners, solid waste, public health, blanking on a couple here. But they're all, it's all critical to your staffs to make sure that they both have education and training and advocacy of their own. So that's where we're at there. I do want to give you a quick update on indigent defense. So you may have seen that the lawsuit that was filed a year ago was dismissed in Thurston Superior Court. We believe that is an error, and the board approved an appeal direct to the Supreme Court, and feel fairly confident that will be taken by the court. The reason is twofold. The Davison case, which was a similar case for juvenile indigent defense, clearly showed the state's responsibility, and that the most logical group to make a complaint is the counties, because we have a nexus to providing that service. The second being that Seattle School District versus the state was basically the McCleary case before McCleary. The school district sued on behalf of their students for the state not meeting its paramount duty. And in that case, the court said, yes, that they're the logical organization to file this case on behalf of the students that they serve, because they again have that nexus there. The Thurston judge, and this is common of Thurston Superior Court judges, is a former state AG, and it's fairly common for them to take a very state-centric position, and so we feel pretty good about that. That said, we also know that because it's a part of our legislative agenda, that filing, continuing on with that, not only was fairly low risk, the cost isn't that great. All the briefings have been created, but also we need to show the legislature that we are continuing to push, because not only are we seeking the existing costs for caseloads, but you've probably heard about the new proposed caseloads that the Supreme Court will also be reviewing in their capacity as administrators of the court. So we're early yet, and we can't account for every cost possible, but we did build with the work help of Snohomish County's Chief Deputy Defense Counsel, a calculator basically to estimate these costs. We haven't heard from everyone, but we're getting some early estimates in, and it looks like those costs will be 2 to 3 times what your existing costs are, because that's about what they're going to require you to pay. We also have concerns about the logistics of providing that service. We're already in a lot of parts of the state having trouble finding enough attorneys to take this work. How are we going to do it when we triple the necessity for that work? And also, just as a matter of logistics, they put some support staff at the end of the ramp up. If we were to have our druthers about making some changes, it makes more sense to try to stretch the attorney's hours as far as possible and begin hiring paralegals, legal assistants, and social workers up front. We also think, because some counties have already been doing this, that it improves outcomes. So from our view, it's a little bit backwards. Unfortunately, and I got a call from a commissioner a little earlier concerned that we aren't arguing against these caseload standards. The problem is these are national standards. They've been recommended by the National Bar. And so essentially our bar association, when they recommended them, just adopted those national standards. So we're not really in a great position as an organization to argue against them. Certainly the prosecutors, defense counsel, whoever is in a better place, but it's going to be tough for us to do so. There is a comment period, we believe, coming. So because the court adopts it, it's not, we can't argue it in front of the legislature. So we'll probably submit some comments, but it's right now the most important thing is sounding the alarm to the legislature that we're going to need a massive amount of resources to do this. So is that something you consider? When I testified last week to the Law and Justice Committee, I did have the chance to speak with the Chief Justice's Chief of Staff, and it was clear that they were listening about the concerns we have and how this would actually go. So on the one hand, it's important that the state provide adequate defense as required by the Constitution. But on the other, it doesn't make much sense to to adopt impossible standards, because then we're just creating a cause of action. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about that or anything else you'd like to talk about. And we're running short on time.
Yes, okay, Commissioner Jordan.
Hi, Derek. As a former AAG, I'm sure that judge is just outstanding in Thurston. But just wanted to ask, was it dismissed on standing grounds or some technicality like that? Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. It was on standing, and that's why I was going over the standing issue about why we think that was an error. But yeah, we didn't get to, in fact, I will say this, on the merits, they did include a discussion of that in the decision. So there was at least an acknowledgement that the system is in crisis.
So again, I would encourage, we still have a little bit more time, but I would encourage any of you that have questions to reach out to Derek now. That's his role, is to talk to commissioners all the time, 24/7.
Always happy to.
But, these are big issues facing us, and And, you know, indigent defense is just one of those that shows how, I mean, even King County is like, can we still be on the lawsuit with you as it moves forward? So they see the need, and that's why it is important, just, you know, having all 39 counties together and really trying to work that out. When Eric and I, when we were at a conference a couple of years ago, we talked to Utah, who had one of their counties pull out. And they went to a weighted voting, and they said that since they went to the weighted voting, it was on an on-call basis, they hadn't called for weighted voting. So I mean, so a lot of it is just kind of I think we're seeing this in a lot of areas, not just here with Wasac. I think I think AWC is seeing it. The school districts, their association is seeing it. That I think it's just kind of the signs of the times right now where everyone wants to feel like they have control and power because they're putting the most money in their minds. And it's really, I think when push comes to shove, it's really everybody is together, and really the reality of that isn't any different. I mean, we all care about the same issues, and we saw that in this process. It was really interesting to see the process that, because there was talk about an urban caucus and a rural caucus and all of that, and just, really the issues are, pertain to all of us. And I think when we do have our own individual lobbyists, I mean, they are lobbying more on behalf of us, because there's going to be issues that are more specific to Spokane County or to King County, and just hiring more lobbyists individually isn't going to get those global issues passed. So it's really the power of Wasac that does that.
And those contract lobbyists will tell you the same thing. I mean, they're nervous about how this is going as well, because that's just not a role that they can fill. But yeah, I will say this, that it feels like it's sort of like in baseball. You know how there's kind of unwritten rules that you don't break, otherwise the players will enforce them themselves. We have always had, I think, some unwritten rules as an organization, like where we tried to recognize where each other's pain points were, what everyone needed, and trying to look out for those other jurisdictions as much as we could. I think where we went a little bit off the rails, it was just a lack of understanding. And so what we're doing here is adopting some of those unwritten rules and to operate in the way I think we kind of always did before. And that won't get rid of all the problems, but it certainly at least makes people feel like they're not going to be sort of run over. And I will tell you that the similar processes we have for Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the 4 Puget Sound largest counties, and we have these same discussions there. It's been a little bit funny hearing people worry that the urban counties will all lock up together and dominate the discussions. You should see some of those meetings. They don't all agree on everything, and so it's we've had kind of similar issues. Concerns about the weighted vote and how those policies are adopted, and those are actually written into law, so the stakes can be fairly high. So I think we're headed in a direction that really is getting back to what our core values were, and that's ultimately trying to remove some of the politics and focusing on what is important to county business. If we do that, I think we'll largely all agree.
So Josh, Commissioner Kearns, I saw you come off video. Did you want to say something?
We've kind of moved on, but just to confirm, you had mentioned Pearson Snohomish are, at least for 2024, are not paid up, but you expect they're going to pay about half or so by the end of June. But King is not paid up for 24, and they're not really a part of the discussion, but they never paid their 2023 dues, correct?
Just partial.
Yeah, I believe a portion of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you go back and look at it, there's not really a rhyme or reason to what they paid. They paid we have several assessments, and they paid most of those, and then paid a portion of the general dues. So.
And the reason why we separate out the assessments is because those could go to separate funds versus just the general fund. If we just set it as, here's your total dues, you can choose to pay it all out of the general fund, or you can have the solid waste portion come out of solid waste fund. You can have the engineers portion come out of the engineers. So that's why we allocate the different dues structure in that manner, so you can use the funds that it truly reflects. So then some counties have taken that, well, we'll pay this dues, but we're not gonna pay that dues. And so that's what we're trying to avoid as well.
Yeah, you know, it's sort of like insurance. You really can't have an à la carte approach where everyone picks and chooses, because ultimately on all these issues, we're representing all 39 counties, and it's not really possible to separate those out. The other thing is that some of those other assessments are for subgroups. And so we have like the Coastal Caucus, which, you know, obviously Spokane isn't part of, but then we have the Columbia River Caucus and a number of other organizations that have their own like geographic, usually, membership. And I see we've arrived at the
We
time
have
you
arrived at the
suggested.
time, I know, it's like my little reminders.
No, I think this is, thank you so much for
Yeah,
coming. I
happy to.
think this helps me prepare, and there'll be like an email coming out with a bunch of attachments with the changes that show
Yes.
current to change before the June 26th.
Yeah, you'll get it with about 2 weeks advance. And again, if you get it and there's anything that you have a question on, you can either talk to Commissioner Cooney or call me directly, whatever your pleasure is. We want to make sure that everyone is comfortable before we go into that meeting. Well, as comfortable as can be. Obviously, there may be some disagreement, but
And there'll still be discussion. I mean, we have lots of discussion,
Yeah.
lively discussion at our board meetings. So I don't think it's gonna be, you know, any kind of rubber stamp. I think we want to have the discussion. But we're also trying to get the information out ahead of this, so that way you have time to think about it and realize what everyone's been thinking about as we've really been trying to put together the updated bylaws. And I really have to give credit, you know, in LSC to the LSC committee, which is our legislative steering committee for people listening. That, you know, they really took this opportunity to really kind of lead the charge, because a lot of what was happening, I think a lot of the dissension and feelings were surrounding, you know, the legislative steering committee. And so they really have, during this first half of the year, taken the lead and really looked at how to make it better, how to look at it differently. So everybody is feeling heard, and then coming up with that list. And you know, it's great for Derek to really say the list ahead of, you know, as we started the meeting, so people know that they are all issues that we all care about and are important to us as counties. So, and Ally, so you went off mute, so I'll let you say something.
Well, I just wanted to echo your comments, Madam Chair. Of all the time I've been on LSC, I think this has been the issue that has been most debated and most discussed and agonized over. And you know, I agree with you that, you know, the LSC, you know, the members have kind of gotten over the initial angst and are really working to try and find a compromise. So and nobody's been shy about sharing their perspective, but you know, you set that aside and you say, okay, where's the middle ground? How can we move how can we move forward together? Because I think there is a universal appreciation for the fact that we are stronger together. It's just, what does that roadmap look like and stuff? So anyway, just thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, no, thank you, because I think that's where I hope everybody comes into our general membership meeting kind of with that same perspective, because we really truly do want to be strong and we are better together.
And I do want to add 2 quick things because it's important to know is that priority list, that those are the ones that we're going to take up an issue and we're going to proactively advocate for it. Other issues we will continue to work on if they fit our county, you know, policies. We will continue to express our concerns with things that the legislature is doing or advocating on behalf of bills that, you know, sometimes our legislative friends come up with a bright idea that we want to support. And then lastly, the issues that you heard us talk about, urban issues versus rural issues, that is only for our internal purposes to adopt the agenda. You won't hear that anywhere. They're all county issues, and we'll work on them together.
Well, thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
all.
being here. I appreciate it. And again, please feel free to reach out and as you get the packet, you know, if you have questions, again, reach out to myself or Derek and we just want to try to make sure everybody's informed. Again, last time decisions were being made before that 2 weeks. And so it was really hard. You know, and there was a lot of changes. And like I said, we did adopt a lot of changes at the November meeting. These are just the big ones still left. So thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And we'll see everybody back on Tuesday.